All right, welcome into the Five Guys, the new twice weekly show here on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. You also may be hearing this on the Five on the Floor podcast feed. We try to give you some content from the YouTube channel from time to time. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Donno. You can follow him conveniently at Alex Donno. We'll tell you about our two sponsors. First at the top, our friends over at 305 Jerseys. You can find them at 305jerseys.com. We like to partner with local sponsors. This is as local as it gets. This is your home for dead stock and vintage jerseys from the Heat, Panthers, Dolphins, Marlins, and more from the local teams. Born from a passion for wearing jerseys of old styles and past players, Jerseys 305 aims to make every fan stand out from the crowd with unique pieces that you don't commonly see anymore. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not today. Jerseys 305 created by the fans for the fans. They're diehards just like you. In fact, they may be listening to this episode, so they understand your passion because it's their passion too. And again, in their exclusive collection, the authenticity is guaranteed. They have a verification process where they inspect each item and look for consistency with lettering, numbering, tags, special details, players who played at the time where a brand was made, officially licensed jerseys for that league, amongst others. So check them out. Jerseys305.com. Again, that's Jerseys305.com. All right, here with Alex, and the news is not good, my friends. The Miami Heat are a play-in team again. Now, maybe not permanently, but it's certainly trending that way. Our friend Alex Anthony Chang over at the Miami Herald found the numbers on Basketball Reference, and the Heat currently have a 22% chance of getting out of the play-in. They're in the 8th seed after a loss to Philadelphia. They could have gotten out of the play-in last night, actually, because Indiana lost to a ravaged Cleveland team. A lot of people are going to point to the fact that Cleveland's been playing with a bunch of guys out and they've been winning. To me, that's no excuse for the Heat always having so many guys out. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But let's just put this here, okay? Parts of the Eastern Conference are a little bit more competitive maybe than were anticipated, although the top seems to be really right now just Boston. And the Knicks play well when Anunoby is healthy. But I don't think the front office expected to be in a play-in situation right now. I don't think Eric Spoelstra expected to be in a play-in situation right now. After all, I've mentioned many times on Five on the Floor that he has focused more on seeding this year than he has previously. He's mentioned it at least 4 times in different press conferences that we kind of know what seed we're at. The 8th seed is just not acceptable for this franchise. Even if you're over 500, you look at some of the deeper metrics, we've talked about those. They are pretty much a flat line in terms of net rating. They're towards the middle of the pack or under the middle of the pack in most categories, particularly offensively. They have hardly beaten any good teams at all this season. I guess their one signature win would be at Milwaukee, but the fact that I can mention it off the top of my head pretty much tells you where they're at. They're average, and I feel like at this point, Alex, we're focusing on what they're going to be because of what they were in the postseason last year. But, I mean, Jimmy Butler's not playing regularly. He's on pace to play like 55 games. Tyler Hero is at 36 games. It doesn't look like he's going to play many more. I don't give me a reason to be positive about this situation because I right now they're trending towards the play-in, and I don't think they get out of the play-in.
No, I can't give you a positive, Ethan, honestly, because people will look at the recent history. The recent history was they were a 7 seed and a play-in team, and they were actually a few minutes away in that second play-in game against Chicago of being knocked out completely. Thankfully, they woke up in the final 4 minutes, finished that game, and then the rest was history. They made an improbable run into the NBA Finals. And so I think a lot of Heat fans will look at, hey, they did it last year. Play-in. I think people maybe remember the play-in not being such a big deal when it was because they almost got eliminated in the play-in. It's such a you're talking about a 1 or 2 game sample in the play-in. Like, it's just such a random. There's a reason why they play 7-game series at the regular in the NBA playoffs is because one game doesn't necessarily tell the story between 2 teams. So even if you are the better team in a 1 play-in game opportunity, there's no guarantee you get through in that. So I think a lot of Heat fans will grasp the fact that, hey, they got through the play-in to the NBA Finals last year. They can do it again. But no, I'm not so optimistic right now, Ethan. And I hope they change my mind and change my outlook on this because they haven't beaten a team not called the Pistons since March 2nd. Like, it's been a really, really long time. You talked about not beating the top teams and not getting signature wins. Not a whole lot has changed since a week ago, or I guess it was 5 days ago, the last time we talked Heat on this show, where they hadn't beaten a team with a top 5 record. That still obviously hasn't happened. Going up against the 76ers team last night that's in a very similar spot, but they're not currently in the play-in compared to the Heat. You had an opportunity to have an important victory over them and get, I think, what would have been a season sweep if you could have gotten that last night. And, the other part about it is that you talk about seeding being important to Spo this year. You certainly wouldn't know it watching the Heat in, recent weeks, because it's hard to really get a full assessment of who this team is when they're missing certain key players every single night. And you're asking players to play roles on this team that aren't necessarily the ideal roles to play on. And last night was especially frustrating for poetic reasons. I mean, first, you had the third quarter that reared its ugly head again last night. You entered the fourth quarter down 14 points. You were able to tie the game. I thought you ran out of gas, but then seeing Kyle Lowry being playing for the other team, being one of the guys who sunk your ship last night, that was not on my bingo card. And he made plays and shot better than I'd ever seen him shoot when he was playing with the Miami Heat. That made it hurt a little bit more, Ethan. Like the fact that you were playing against a team that you really could have and should have beaten last night, and that Kyle Lowry played a role in your demise yesterday. He's played a role in the Heat's demise wearing a Heat uniform in the past. This time he did it for the other team. That was not an easy pill for me to swallow. And so now, you're looking at an 8 seed. You're looking at a play-in. I'm not as optimistic about getting through the play-in as some Heat fans are.
No, I'm not either. And you mentioned Kyle Lowry, and look, obviously people are going to look at that and say, okay, you never should have given Kyle up. That's not what this is about. This is about the fact that you're playing lineups against them that include, guys you picked up off the street. And other guys are out of the rotation. I mean, you're having to go with Thomas Bryant, Patty Mills, DeLon Wright because others are not available. And we're just at this point where that has to be addressed, and I've thrown my hands up on this, and to me, everything should be on the table this offseason because you can't have a team that just doesn't take the regular season seriously. And I'm not saying that certain injuries are not legitimate or anything like that, but there has to be a reason, okay?
Right.
That if you go back 10 or 11 years and you look at the big three Heat, okay, and we would complain about Dwayne Wade's availability. And Dwayne played more games by percentage during that period of time than Hero's going to play, than Butler's going to play. And then you look at the top of that group. Mike Miller was available for more games than some of these guys are available for. And what we complained about was that Mike was always hurt. Then take a look at some of the guys that played 75, 77, 80 games. LeBron was available for 75 plus games. Okay, again, there was a lockout season in there, so it's a little bit different on that one. But you could count on them to play. And this whole Heat, philosophy of we have enough, I admire it. I admire the no excuses. Why are they in that situation every night?
Right.
Why are they in that situation with this group? I mean, Duncan got hurt last night. Hopefully he doesn't miss any time, but he's leading the team in game. I mean, he's one of the only guys on the team that's going to get to 70 games this year. Like, that's why I've said he's been their most important player because he plays. He plays. And I don't know what's happened over the past decade. It's probably above my pay grade to understand it. But you cannot go from a team where you had your top 9 and 10 guys that were playing 65, 70, 75, 80 games to a team where you don't know who's going from night to night. And then, yes, in the fourth quarter last night, they gave it away in part because Bam didn't get the ball.
Yeah.
But again, they're playing with these makeshift lineups that don't know how to get Bam the ball consistently. And so he can ask for it, but they're not running the same kind of stuff, particularly, again, when Duncan was out, okay, because he's the lifeline there. But we're going to bring Sean Rochester on to talk about this because he was at the game last night. We'll do that right after the break. But my frustration level right now is not with the team's play. It's with the team's availability. Availability is an ability. And we're talking about a team that used to care about the regular season, used to drive. And I thought they went too much that way, Alex. Like, Pat used to drive for the 1 seed and all that. We saw the big 3 teams settled in at the 2 seed and upset 1 seeds. But, like, to not care at all It just seems like they don't care at all about the regular season anymore, or at least about enough players being available for it. And to me, that's frustrating at this stage.
How much of that is that Jimmy's attitude? Like, is Jimmy the one who sets the tone on that? Because obviously, I know that when Miami got him, he still is to this day, and certainly was when Miami acquired him, an excellent basketball player who's got another gear. We all know what he can do in the playoffs, but Miami got him on, the back. He's on the back nine of his career, obviously. He spent so much of the early part of his career playing under Tom Thibodeau, which adds those extra mileage. He's probably older in basketball years than he is in real life years. And, he seems to be the one that is so carefully maintained. Like, does he just kind of set the tone for the entire team that if Jimmy's only going to bust his butt to play 50, 55 times in the regular season, do other guys adopt that attitude?
Well, I do think it sets a tone, honestly. And I can't speak to the severity of each injury. Okay. Yeah. I don't like doing that with players. Right. But there is a mythology that's been built here about playoff Jimmy and about just being right for the postseason. And I think that's trickled down to the rest of the team. I do. And I think that's why you're seeing 3, 4, 5 guys are out every night. And this is a recent year trend. I'm telling you, go back through the games played numbers of Heat teams. And Pat drove them too hard. He drove them too hard in practices. He drove them too hard to play through stuff. But they have swung so far the other direction at this point. And I can't speak to everybody's injury, but then they need to find some guys who are consistently durable who can be out there most of the time. And that's why, I'm not going to blame a guy like Jaquez, who is clearly out of his depth right now because teams have adjusted to certain things he does, the spin in the lane. They're counting on him to shoot more threes now. It's not really his game at this stage. But this is what happens. Players have to slide up a roll when somebody is out. And yes, it worked against Sacramento and Jaquez had the big game, but it's not going to work consistently. And to me, that was deflating. Again, I don't know the severity of this latest Jimmy injury. There are like 4, 5, 6 that we have to track all the time. But it's just like when you see that message come out, Jimmy Butler is out 3 hours before the game. It's like, okay, how are they going to scramble to stay in this one?
Right.
And like the regular season, particularly at this stage against another team that you're competing with, should not be how are we going to scramble to stay in this one? I think it's something they need to look at from the beginning. And Aaron mentions it here on our chat. Duncan and Bam are the most durable on the team. The numbers suggest it. Those two and Jaquez. And here's the thing, Caleb, since the first month of the season, has been there every night. So I think you can throw him in the mix too. He's worked through things. But again, I'm not one to usually criticize guys about injuries, call them injury prone. I'm just looking at the reality of the situation. The macro is their players are not playing enough. And so we'll bring Sean in to address that here as we go forward. Before we do, I want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at Better Edge. You can find them at betteredge.com. Use the code 5RSN to get $20 to play. Right now, we've got the bracket challenge going on. Make sure that you enter. It's free. It's free. It costs you nothing. Okay. So go check it out. I'm going to tweet it out again before the end of the show. So check it out on the 5 Reasons Sports Twitter page. We're going to pin it to the top. Get your brackets in. I still need to do it. I promise I'm going to get to it right after the show. So I'll jump in there. I have not watched a lot of college basketball this year. I will acknowledge that.
The thing that was hard for me is I'm all in on University of Miami basketball, and me and Melissa Hoodie Girl, we're both out. Obviously, the men's team didn't deserve to get in, but I'm angry about it. I'm angry about the women's team getting snubbed. So now it's like, all right, I got to learn all about these teams not named Miami.
Exactly. So you don't really need to learn all about it because you have nothing to risk, Alex. So just throw it in there. And then at the very end, we're giving away, we got T-shirts on the website. We'll give away, we're going to give away prizes to the top 3 that in our contest. So check them out, betteredge.com. Use the code 5RSN. A lot of 5 Reasons people are in this thing. So it's your opportunity to take them out. All right, let's bring him on. He's now 2-1. He's now 2-1. In Philadelphia. You did not get to take, you can follow him at S Rochester NBA. You can, Sean Rochester goes by Coach Rochester on IG if you want to follow him there as well. You did not get to take your usual Philadelphia fans leaving early video last night with 3 minutes left. I was waiting for that one. Didn't happen. Why? What happened last night?
I was going to record myself leaving early there in the fourth quarter, but I felt obligated that, you got me that credential that I had to stick up to the end to see what happened. No, it was definitely an ugly game. It was not very pretty basketball, literally from start to finish by either team. I think turning the ball over was the thing that stood out to me the most. Just sloppy basketball. And then obviously the defense I felt like was good enough. But the recent trend now is the offense just can't get to 100 points. And it's 2024. If you can't get to 100 points, you just can't win. No matter how good your defense is, you just can't win in this modern basketball.
Yeah, I'd love to get your take, Coach, on what Ethan and I were just talking about before we brought you in, and that's this trend of the availability or lack thereof. And I know that you see more of this league-wide. It's not just a Miami Heat thing, but the Heat used to be on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like you didn't see this many guys and Jimmy missing so many games. I think 14 games left in the regular season. 9 of those are at home. Like, are they just going to start now caring and guys are going to play through more injuries? How do you think this is going to play out? And what do you think about this trend?
Well, speaking to the trend, I think, and it's going to be us 3 old guys yelling at the clouds right now, but like, this is the modern athlete. This is the mentality of, I can flip the switch. I don't need to practice. And I'm not one that's going to speak poorly on AAU because I'm going to go to my AAU practice tonight. And what I'm going to run into as a coach is kids that don't want to turn it on right now because they're going to be ready in a couple weekends when we go to a tournament. And you hear that, brought up about NBA players, obviously a different category than what I'm going to coach tonight, but it's that mentality. It's that, Jimmy Butler has a switch. Not many people have that same switch where they can just suddenly turn it on and they're Michael Jordan again. And, in terms of the availability, I kind of question sometimes, is it not so much a pain tolerance and questioning the athlete, but like a willingness to go out there if you're at 85%, let's say. Like, nobody's 100% right now. Like Caleb Martin right now, he gets banged up and knocked around every time he drives to the basket. There's no way that guy is even probably 75% fully healthy, but he's going to go out there and play. Is it a toughness? Is it a mentality? I don't know. And it's not to question other people lacking that, but what makes certain guys harder to be available and what makes certain guys just roll up their sleeves and go out there every single night? And like you guys have said very well, it's an availability problem. Like, we have I think, a pretty deep team. I think Ethan has said that really since back to training camp. If we didn't have this deep of a team, where the hell would we be right now? We'd be fighting to get into the play-in tournament. Like, it's just a wild way to look at things, and I think the shift, like you guys have said, has been very drastic.
Well, I think, and it starts with Jimmy, and that so much of this focus has been on Tyler, and I get it, and there is a decision that needs to be made on Tyler in the offseason if he's not a playoff factor for them this year, particularly after missing so much of the regular season again. But everything in the NBA comes down to your best player. It just does. Like, that's what everybody feeds off of. And so we can talk about the third best guy, whether you consider him third best, fourth best, fifth best, whatever. He's in that top 5 until we're blue in the face here. It comes down to their number 1. Like, if their number 1 is not out there, I don't know what kind of game they have. I mean, let's just first, it's again the message that's been sent that Jimmy will turn it on when he has to, which other guys, like you said, can't do. But if they adopt that mentality, then the regular season is not taken seriously, okay? Except by guys like Caleb. And this is why I'm strongly in the re-sign Caleb camp, unless he gets way too expensive, because he's going to force his way onto the damn court. I think that was part of the problem early in the season, but at least you can count on Caleb Martin. Like, you can count on him. But when Jimmy is not available, then it is, okay, who's going to fill that role? And I think the biggest person that it falls on is Bam. And it forces Bam to be something that, as much as a lot of us want him to be that, he is not at this stage, which is an every game go-to guy. He's just not. That's not, Sean, that's not primary in his responsibility. Primary in his responsibility is holding this papier-mâché defense together on a nightly basis and covering up for everybody else. And so then you put him in a role where, okay, he has a strong 3 quarters, but then they don't get him the ball in the 4th. And where the hell was Bam? Again, this team is not designed to do that. They're designed to find Jimmy. And I just think that it's created this kind of cascade. And I'm not saying trade Jimmy, but I do think that, and I asked him before the season, he gave me that tongue-in-cheek answer. I said, how many games are you going to play this year? And he says, I don't know, 10? Well, he surpassed that. But, I mean, is there a way to get 70 at this point? Like, get to the 65-game threshold and see what this team looks like, because he's not going to be anywhere near that.
If we can get Better Edge to put up a 70 over-under on Jimmy games played, I will smash whatever money I have in my account on the under, because I don't see that happening. To your point about having Bam being elevated, that's everyone on the roster right now. Like, to use a baseball term, like your 9-hole hitter is now your cleanup guy in a lot of these games. Like that's the situation they're in. Last night in the fourth quarter, they started off. Terry Rozier's getting full court denied. Like, you're not even going to get the inbounds pass because Batum's out there guarding him. You don't have Duncan. You don't have Jimmy. You don't have Tyler. The next guy is Bam, right? Bam, they're completely trying to take him out of the offense. So now you've cut off Terry, you've cut off Bam. Well, what's left? Rookie Jaime, credit to him. I know he took 2 probably poor shots, but at least the guy had the marbles to go out there and take them. Like, he tried to be physical. Today, now the NBA, you're not going to get those calls. He took the 3 in the corner. Not a great shot, but he's a rookie. At least he took it. And I don't know where you were going to get a better shot. Patty Mills could barely hit the backboard on a freaking layup with a little scoop layup that he likes to do. Who else are you going to? Caleb? I mean, and it's not to be negative about those 3 guys, but like, that's not the position. They're supposed to be the complementary piece. One of them's on the floor at the end of the game with Jimmy, Tyler, Terry, and Bam. Now we got 4 of them on the floor, 3 of them on the floor, and you're expecting them to make plays. Like, they're not cast for that role, but we don't have any other choice because they're the only ones available.
Sean, I haven't seen the Heat, especially Jimmy, getting the type of routine foul calls that used to be a regular thing. And I know our guy Brady Hawk got Spoelstra talking a lot about that after one of the recent games. Like, has this been a league-wide thing, or has this been more of a Miami Heat thing where you're just not the games are not being officiated the same way?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff on, Ethan Strauss and Habistro, those guys. Really, since the All-Star break, the foul calls, shooting fouls, technical fouls, everything is down. The NBA denied it. Then the NBA admitted to it. And now it's who knows. But I can tell you, and Ethan, I know, has been to Philadelphia. You get a pretty good media seat there. You're only a couple rows off the baseline. And so you can see and hear the physicality. And especially in the first half when the Heat were on my end. And that's the half where Spo went nuts and Caleb got the technical. There are fouls that it's not bias. It's not me being a Heat fan looking through my red glasses. Those are fouls that they're letting go. And I hate to single out, but there's the one newer official. He was number 43 was the official. He was horrible last night. That's the guy Spo went after, and that's who gave Caleb the technical. The other 2 guys were vets. I didn't think they were terrible, but it always seemed like luck of the draw was that third official was the guy that was swallowing the whistle every time we went to the basket.
So I'd love your idea on how you handicap the rest of the regular season in the seeding, okay? Because the Heat they're in the play-in right now. They're a game out of the non-play-in seeds. Philadelphia, they're a game behind Philadelphia, who's currently in the 6. Do you think they're going to finish in the play-in, or can they rise out of that?
I think about a week ago is when I came up with this 48 wins. I'm still at 47, 48. Last night was a game that I had them winning, so I guess I would have to lean down to 47 now, but I think they can steal one, tomorrow night. Cleveland is a game where they shouldn't win that on the road, but now they're without Mitchell, they're without Strus. They're kind of another banged-up team, but they piece it together just as well as we do. If you can get that one, you're right back on pace for 48, in my mind. There's a lot of winnable games, but how can you predict this team? You never know on any given night who's going to be there, who's going to be available. So I think that they push up through it. There were a couple Heat PR and a front office person sitting within the table of me that were paying attention to the Cleveland and Pacers game last night. Could it be that they play in Cleveland tomorrow night? Could it be that they're watching the Pacers because that's someone you're competing with? But they were aware of what was going on in that game while our game was going on. I don't know what you read into that, but we're all aware of it as fans. I mean, we're all watching the standings every night.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Cleveland, Indiana. There were two ways to go with this. If you're a serious team that thought you were making a run, you're more watching Cleveland for the chance to move all the way up. But I think at this stage, we've all kind of accepted that they and the Knicks are probably gone from this Heat team simply because I don't see Miami putting that kind of run together. We've talked about it. They haven't beaten anybody but Detroit. It required a Bam game winner from 3 to do it in the last one. They haven't beat anybody in Detroit in about 4 weeks. And they haven't beat the good teams this year. And like I said, I felt this roster was better than it was last season, but they just can't get it together because they can't get any kind of rhythm. And we don't really have anything to draw back on from this season that makes me feel like a run is coming. We have something to draw back on from last postseason, but a lot of those pieces are gone. Like I'll say this, like you mentioned Max. Max is hurt right now. Like I said, anybody can get hurt at any time. Max was durable for them last year. At least they could count on him to play, even if he didn't play particularly well in the regular season until they got to the postseason. So, Sean, you say you still have him at 47. I have him at 47 wins before the season. Okay, so they're kind of trending in that direction, anticipating again that I thought Jimmy was going to miss some time. I have a hard time seeing them get there now, though. They need 10 wins the rest of the year. They don't have a real tough schedule, but they still get the Knicks. I think they still have one against the Magic, right? They've got that you mentioned the game in Cleveland. If you're to look at one of those teams that they can catch right now, Orlando, Philadelphia, Indiana, which would you say they have the best chance to pass?
Even after last night, I'd still say Philly. I mean, I unfortunately get to see a lot of Philly games just, being on TV around here. And I saw Embiid was on the floor last night. He wasn't in sneakers. He wasn't working out. He was in sandals walking around with, I don't know if you saw the jacket he was wearing, but it's definitely not my fashion. Look, so he might have stole that from Tyler's closet. I don't know where he got that. Yeah. It's a little chilly outside. I don't know if it was that cold, but
Tyler's closet is like Plato's closet. They should open those all over South Florida for designs that other white people can't wear. That's real. That's what Tyler should label it.
I definitely can't pull it off. But they struggle to score just like we do. They struggle to defend, except for when last night you go against the Heat who can't score. So I think Philly is going to continue to struggle, and I think they still have to go out west for a trip over the next couple of weeks. So they're a team. Indiana's variability, they're all over the place. Orlando seems to be kind of tying it together, and they might be the most safe. And it's surprising because that's the team that you probably would have of the group thought could be the one that could fall apart with their inexperience. So, I don't know if the seeding matters. I would like to get out of the play-in, like you guys mentioned earlier. And I think the 6th seed is the safer of the choice because you're away from Boston. But are you really worried about the Eastern Conference Finals right now? Like, what do we we're thinking way too far if we're worried about seeding based on avoiding Boston. We just got to get into the playoffs and find a way to scrap together some wins. So
it's hard to be thinking about the Eastern Conference Finals when every game against Detroit is a clutch game. Thanks to Sean.
Well, and let me add one thing to the seeding
Alex.
conversation. Like, obviously, I want to avoid the play-in at all costs because 1 or 2 game sample, it's just too risky. But then if you can be a 6 seed, 5 seed, whatever, just get in because you're going to have to dethrone a Boston at some point. Whether that happens in the first round, like last year, it happens in the conference finals. You're going to have to beat basically the same teams in best of 7. So just avoid that play in at all cost, and I will be satisfied at that point.
I mean, that's where we're at. Does that qualify, Sean, as winning or misery? Avoid the play-in. Should that be the new banner they put up?
Something like that
in 2024.
And to Donno's point, you get about a week off of rest too before that while the other teams are playing in the play-in. So that can be huge too. And I mean, we keep going back to last year. I was trying to rush to try to make these like the TNT Gone Fishing graphics with like me and Brady and Ethan and everyone on it because I was afraid of that night we're going to lose in the play-in. It's all going to be over, and I got to have these ready. We didn't get to use them for 2 months. Like, no one saw last year coming. So to like rely on that happening again, I think is complete like a dream scenario. Like we saw that once, it doesn't happen every time. So I don't think you can rely on that.
The best part is going to be them avoiding the play and having a week off, and 3 players get hurt in their houses before the playoffs start. I feel like that's where we're headed at this stage. Again, thanks to Sean, thanks to Alex. We'll try not to get hurt in our houses. Thanks for joining us on the Five Guys. We'll be back on Thursday, probably more of a Dolphins conversation for those of you who follow us on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.